Hey everybody, and welcome back to Teach Me to Code. This is Charles Max Wood, and this week I'm going to show you metric foo. Before we get started, I just want to point one thing out, and that is here on Teach Me to Code, if you click on requests, you'll see a few things may have changed. This changed from under review to planned. I am going to pick that one up next. What I'll probably do is actually do a cast on shoulda, and then a cast on Factory Girl. We already have a screencast done by Carl Youngblood on Cucumber, and then I'll probably tie it all together. I am looking at these though, so if you do have something you want to see done, I highly recommend you go in there, put your idea in, and see if you can get people to vote it up the list. Because I'm just going to start at the top of the list and work my way down, and then if there's something that I don't know how to do, then I'll see if I can find somebody who can either show me how to do it or can put together the screencast themselves. All right, so let's head over here to metric foo. Metric foo was written by Jake Scruggs. There's a link over here to his blog, and you can find metric foo at metricfoo.rubyforge.org. Metric foo, what it does is it gathers a bunch of code metrics on your code, and it tells you about how they all work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run this against here, let me zoom this in here real quick. I'm actually going to run this against the code for cruise control. Now I realize that I didn't check it out from the Git repository, so I won't be able to get the churn statistics, but we will be able to get all of the rest of the statistics. So let me show you how to set this up. The first thing you have to do is install metric foo, and all you do is just gem install metric foo. Alright, now as you can see, what we've got here is it installed 9 different gems. And we're just going to go through and have a look at these and what they give you in metric foo. Now you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff here. You don't really need to worry about it. All you really need to do is this right here, require metric foo. That's it. So we'll just come in here. Looks like a good spot right there. Require metric foo, and then rake metrics all. Okay, so we ran into a little problem here because churning requires subversion or Git repo, and there isn't one. So what we're going to do here is we will actually configure metric foo, and you can do that in your rake file, and we'll just take churn out right here. Now churn, all it really does is it gives you a list of the files in your repository, and it lists them by the number of times that they've been checked in. So you'll just get this list, and it's useful for identifying files that kind of do too much. If you have a file that you're editing all the time, you know, and so its number is going to be way higher than the rest, then it's probably got some class or some functionality in there that should be split out to several different files and classes so that it can be managed properly. But anyway, let's go ahead and try this again. Okay, so this is a little bit different. I don't know why this isn't working because it should have installed Reek, but it didn't. So gem install Reek. And Reek's kind of a cool one. I'm looking forward to showing you. So I'm going to install it, and I'll show you what things look like when you're done. I am going to leave the mishaps in here just because if I'm running into these problems, you probably are too. So I just want to run into them and show you where the pitfalls might be so that you're aware and you can make the most of this tool. Alright, so now we have reinstall, so let's go ahead and I don't believe it installed Rudy either, so let's go ahead and just check it out here in gem list. Nope, no Rudy. Wait. Nope, so let's go ahead and get Rudy while we're at it. Sudo gem install Rudy. Alright, so now that we have Rudy, let's go ahead and try this again. Rake metrics all. Alright, so now that it's finished, we have our statistics here. And so I'm just going to run through these. I'll explain what they are. I'll explain what all the numbers mean. And kind of warn you of some of these things. If you click on some of these like metrics, for example, it goes to file / / that'll give you some funky error. I'll just click on it and show you, so it took me to my root folder. Probably not the best idea. So don't click there. If you click on 1.4.0, it just takes you back here. So here we go. Here's Flay. Now Flay tells you where there's duplication in your application. And in this case, this got a Flay score of 0. So good for you guys at Thoughtbot. You got a Flay score of 0. Now that is actually excellent. And I was kind of hoping that I could show you some duplication, but I don't have any code that I can show off because most of the complicated code, which is likely to be fraught with this stuff, is for work, and I can't show you that code. But anyway, let's go into Flog. Now what Flog does is you have a Flog score of code complexity. So your total Flog score is 5500, 06.2, and the average Flog score for any method is 9.2. Now here's what it does. Is it measures testability is effectively what it does. And it does it on what it calls the ABCs. And the ABC is assignments. So, for example, variable assignments, branches, and so that's kind of your cyclomatic complexity, and we'll talk about that when we go into Cycuro, and calls. So if you have like an eval call or some other method call, that might affect its complexity and thereby its testability. So that's just something to think about. And so if you come in here and you look at the red cloth that's included in lib, and if you're not familiar with red cloth, that's something that was written by Y the Lucky Stiff. Anyway, so you can see that has a highest score of 109 Flog score. And so one of the methods in there has a score of 109. The average score is 18, which means that there are a whole bunch that are below it, and that's averaged across 44 methods, and the total cyclomatic complexity is 800. And so you can kind of look at these and see what the worst ones are. So you can kind of go, okay, well, something in here has the highest score of 109, and you can actually come in here. If you click on it, you can see these. It just takes you to a spot lower in the page. I thought it was a separate page, but I guess not. So anyway, so this is your bad one. So you've got a score of 32.7 in assignments, 25.1 in branches, 18.6. These are just lengths, so it just goes through each call within it and tells you how much that's contributed to the overall score. And so if you have a high score here, it may indicate that you may want to break it up so that you can test it easier or things like that. So high scores, not so good. Low scores, really good. So anyway, that is Flog. Now let's come back here to Archive. Archive is one of my favorites. Archive measures test coverage. So basically what it does is it runs your test suite, and then what it does is after running the test suite, then it maps out which lines in your code have or haven't been run. So the worst one here is this one. This is lib cruise control init.rb, and only 24% of it is run. during any of the tests. SMTP TLS, 26% covered. So that means that 75% of these two don't have any tests that run the code there. Now that doesn't mean that the test is or isn't tested. So for example, let's see this 100% right here, config error. If we click on it, it actually gives you a readout on the file, and it'll tell you where it has or hasn't been tested. But anyway, you can see here that this line right here wasn't tested. It wasn't run. But any of these other lines, like if it calls code, for example, and it may just run through these without actually testing that project gives you the right value or line gives you the right value. So that's something to be aware of. If the line was run, then it's counted as covered. And so, you know, it's not perfect, but it is pretty helpful. So anyway, that's archive for you. And I can go into these in more detail maybe in another cast. Now, Reek was written by a guy named Kevin Rutherford. And I actually talked to him last week for the Rails Coach podcast. And it was really interesting. He talked a lot about like what makes good code and why this stuff's important. But you can see here that it gives you the code smells in your code. So the builds controller, for example, it doesn't have a descriptive comment. So in other words, what's going on is the builds controller doesn't have a comment that tells you what its responsibility is. And you know, good coding practice typically tells you that your class should have one job. You know, it can have several methods that help it do its job, but ultimately it should have one job. So the builds controller, its job is to provide information about the builds. So, you know, it doesn't have that comment. And you can decide how critical some of these are. Another thing, tests params project at least 3 times. And so here what you can see is that it's saying if params project, if params project, if params it shows up a couple of times. Calls params 10 times, params build 3 times, params path 4 times. So you can kind of get a feel for, okay, well, you know, maybe I should look at the functionality that's calling into this and figure out what the deal is. You know, why am I calling duplicate multiple times? You know, why am I not putting this information into an object and then breaking it up? You know, or calling against the project or something like that. You know, just different things like that. You've got long method, low cohesion, meaning that it refers to name more than self. In other words, you know, it basically is, it's almost trying to pull information or pull functionality from something else. Anyway, so that'll give you an idea. There are all kinds of these. I don't know what all of them mean, but if you pick up Kevin's book, they do explain what these are. And it does actually tell you which refactoring is ideal for the for that particular code smell, but it doesn't necessarily tell you everything you need to do in order to execute the refactoring. So I'll put that caveat out there. It's a good book. It's a great reference, but I didn't feel like it had all the information that I wanted in it. Rudy, what Rudy does is it points out possible code issues. So, you know, it points out cyclomatic complexity. That's something that Cycroa does as well. But, for example, it has this equal sign in a conditional, and it's just warning you that it probably ought to be an equals equals. Now, I'm guilty of putting a single equals in my stuff all the time. In other words, I'll do the assignment and test that the value isn't nil in the same statement. And, you know, for clarity, it's probably not a good idea to do that, just because equals equals and equals are kind of hard to differentiate sometimes. They're using some class variables here, a case statement that doesn't have an else clause. In other words, it doesn't have a default action if the methodology falls through. You know, this module is a long module. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. It just points out some things that you might want to take into account. let's go on to Cycuro here. So Cycuro gives you cyclomatic complexity. And you saw that back here in, I don't know why there's nothing here. Anyway, you saw that back here in Rudy. What cyclomatic complexity is, well, let's just click on this because it'll take us into the file. Yeah, we can open it in TextMate. So here we go. So show has a cyclomatic complexity of 10. So basically that counts up your code branches. So this unless is one branch because it can do this render text and return, or it can go on to the rest of the project. So this is a guard clause, so that's one. Here's another one, 2, 3, 4 with this if statement right here. Anyway, I don't see it all. I think this is 5, 6. Anyway, so that's, anyway, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 because there are 10 code paths because it could branch at any of these places. And the if else is really the most explicit branch, but basically it's execute this, which would be cyclomatic complexity of 1, but there's this second branch that allows it to continue through. So there you go. So that's your cyclomatic complexity right there. And Cycuro gives that to you. It's probably just not configured to do that kind of stuff. Now you can look at stats. Now the rake stats, it just gives you information here. So code to test ratio basically is just the number of tests, the number of lines of code. They're pretty close to 1 to 1. And just other things, lines of code per method, methods per class, number of methods, number of classes, number of lines of code. So this is just kind of interesting information about your project. So that's metric foo in a nutshell. There is one other thing that I do want to point out, and that is that you have more than just which metrics you run. You have these configuration options, and you can tell it, for example, which folders to run Flog or Reek or Cycuro. In this case, it was told to run against app and lib, and I'm guessing that it ran the cyclomatic complexity against these and didn't find anything that it needed to warn you about. I don't know. In fact, I know that's not true because the other stuff had to be tested. But anyway, you can change the settings here. So if you think that it's okay to have a cyclomatic complexity of 10, you can actually put this in config.cycuro, you give it this hash, you put warn 10, maybe error 15, and you're off and running. So, go ahead and fiddle with it, play with it. Let me know what you think. The bluff graphing, again, was written by one of our experts, Carl Youngblood, and he did a great job. If you run these metrics over and over again, like every day, if you make it part of your build process in Cruise Control or Hudson or something, then the graphs that you run into here, let's just pull up Archive, for example. These graphs will over time actually fill up. So you'll have 419, 420, 421, assuming you're making it better. Maybe you add some code but don't write tests, so 422, 423, and it'll just give you an idea of how you're doing and how you're trending. And so it helps you know, okay, I'm doing better. I'm making my code better. And that's important. So anyway, feel free to check this out, read the notes, and next time I'm probably going to do just a quick demo on Rake is what I think I'm going to do, because I'm doing the short versions, if you remember, every other week. So it'll be less than 10 minutes, and it'll be put up on YouTube. And then the week after that, I'm hoping to do a screencast on shoulda. So if you want to change the order in which I'm doing things, I highly recommend that you go to the website, go ahead and click on the requests, put in a request for whatever it is that you want to learn, and we'll get a screencast up on it. All right, thank you. Jumpstart Lab offers private and corporate training in Ruby, Rails, and related technologies. They are experienced educators, not just good developers, and will get you going quickly. Courses can be scheduled in the U.S. or around the world, and curriculum customized to meet your needs. Learn more at jumpstartlab.com. This episode is sponsored by ClutterPad, the most awesome online project management and collaboration tool ever. Sign up now at www.clutterpad.com.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good, though.
It could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey, boo!
Boo!